Hey everyone, it's the Koopa Man. Last year, just before Christmas, I saw this article written by DetroitOtaku and... Alright, let me be blunt. This is one of the most asinine and insane conspiratorial-minded things I have ever read. At no point in this rambling, incoherent article is he even close to anything that could be considered a rational argument. I feel dumber for having read it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Okay, a simple wrong would have done just fine, but...
But rather than talk about how idiotic it is, let's break it down. For context, Palworld is an indie game made by a studio based out of Japan called Pocket Pair. Gee, I wonder what this game is inspired by when the studio is named that. But it isn't their debut title. They have also made other games such as Craftopia, which also wore its inspirations on its sleeve. The issue with Palworld isn't that it's Pokemon inspired, no. Games, movies, comic books, and the like take inspiration from other works all the time. And it isn't the fact that the creators, quote, didn't cite their inspirations either, like a certain leather-bedecked mascara-wearing twink would have you believe. Heck, he himself has ripped off Thief quite transparently in his own book series, and Red Dead Redemption in his comic book. The issue with Palworld was timing. If you haven't seen my previous videos on the subject of Pokemon, or otherwise have been living under a rock, you'd be quite unaware that the Pokemon franchise has been in a bit of a slump. Ever since the transition from Generation 7 Sun and Moon to Generation 8 Sword and Shield, the games haven't been up to snuff as they could be for the most profitable franchise of all time. Heck, some would argue that the decline started much earlier in the transition from Generation 5 to 6, and some would argue it's even earlier than that. But regardless, despite the high sales that Nintendo boasts as the most important things, the quality of the games is bargain bin shovelware level at best. And to make matters worse, in walks this indie studio with a game inspired by their brand worn on their sleeve, who just dog walk all over them with better looking graphics and, from what my friends tell me, a more interesting story. In fact, watch this comparison montage while we discuss this to rub salt in DetroitOtaku's wounds. Now, while I'm not arguing that Palworld is the most beautiful and high-fidelity graphics game ever made, in fact it very much isn't, you can clearly see that it blows Pokemon out of the water. And again, I remind you, Pokemon is the most profitable franchise of all time. This isn't even an exaggeration. It's a statement of fact. It is twice the value of the second most valued franchise of all time, Mickey fucking Mouse. There is no excuse. They have the money to produce something better than what we're getting, but they don't, so here we are. It's been said by scorned ex-Pokemon fans that Game Freak either doesn't want to do the franchise anymore, or just hates the franchise and its fans, and this franchise degradation is being done purely out of spite and resentment. It's a consensus by the fans that the fan media and fan games are currently doing Pokemon better than Game Freak and the Pokemon Company are, and it's a hard case to argue against when the latest game, Pokemon Legends EA, ended up being at the very best, mid, mediocre, middling. So in walks Palworld, which shows that a more dedicated team with less money and more ambition can produce a better product. And it shows, as Palworld is still among one of the most played games on Steam even right now. Which brings us finally to the article. It opens by poisoning the well by stating that this is an East vs West issue and framing the pro-Pocket Pair side as being Nintendo-hating Western game journalists and leftists, which is but one of the many logical fallacies that make up this article. Framing the Palworld debate as a case of left vs right or East vs West does the very thing that this article accuses those it condemns of doing and oversimplifies the issue. But this is being done deliberately through deceptive framing. The article isn't being written to give you the truth, it's being written to convince you of something, and that something being that Palworld is actually a plot by the Communist Chinese and Sony to devalue Nintendo as a brand by opening the floodgates to unlicensed rip-off games of Nintendo properties. I'm not even joking, but we'll get into that. The article frames the reason why Nintendo is in the right is because the patents they've filed that some fans cite as being filed after Palworld were actually filed before its release around the release of Legends Arceus, which is true. Those patents were still brought before the US Patent and Trademark Office before a Trump-appointed copyright director, and were still struck down last year by said Trump-appointed director. Therefore, if this is a Chinese conspiracy by Xi Jinping and Sony, it's one that the Orange God Emperor is an active member of. Furthermore, the same patents in question were also shot down by the Japanese Patent Court, meaning this conspiracy goes all the way up to the top. I wouldn't be surprised if in a response to this video the author goes completely unhinged and tries to claim that it's Israel behind all of it, because that's the level of insane we're dealing with at this point. The article then goes further to try to explain that Palworld is being made as a, quote, mean-spirited parody of Pokemon rather than taking inspiration. To which I say, so what? That's still protected under fair use parody protections. If being mean-spirited was grounds to go after someone legally, there would be no Saturday Night Live. Heck, the entire late-night television genre would be completely gone. Germany would have had the grounds to sue Spike Jonze for the Fuhrer's face, and if this was the case, why has Nintendo and Game Freak not gone after PETA with as much vigor for Pokemon Black and Blue back during the release of Black and White? That game was largely ignored by the company. But then again, DetroitOtaku cannot prove that Pocket Pair, again notice the name of the company, is truly acting maliciously, because you cannot prove that without being a mind reader. But it wouldn't be the first time a Razor Force prescribed that they knew the true motives of someone else. Which leads them into their true conclusion, that Sony is the reason for the lawsuit because Sony is aiding Pocket Pair somehow because of a deal Pocket Pair made for a potential anime adaptation through Aniplex, which is owned by Sony.
Objection!
This is a clear contradiction of the facts at hand. Palworld first released on Steam in January of 2024. It was out for a whole year and a half before Sony even approached them for the anime deal. Furthermore, Aniplex is a subsidiary of Sony. It is still capable of making its own deals with autonomy from the grander Sony brand. In fact, Aniplex and Nintendo have made deals before in the past, as have Nintendo and Crunchyroll, which is owned by Aniplex. So this has hardly anything to do at all with Sony's video game interests. Going even further than that, Sony had moved its PlayStation brand and all its video game interests to the West. If Sony was trying to destroy Nintendo so that they're the dominant force in the video game console company, why would this action not have gone through Sony Computer America instead?
This last piece of evidence will solve all the remaining riddles. That's...
What is that?
This is Mr. LaBelle's own private brand of hair color. It washes out with just water. The court will also recall that the amazing Ninetales mask washed up along the side of the village river with white hair inside it. What's this? Are you saying that preening peacock's hair color is... That's exactly what I'm saying. Mr. LaBelle's hair color is a freaky work of fiction. But thanks to the river flowing through Ninetales Vale, we now have a real-life expose. The white hair in this mask is conclusive evidence proving you're the real killer. A DNA test is all we need to prove it, and we both know we'll get a match. Admit it! Florid LaBelle, you were the one who killed Alderman Rex QB! You... peasant! How dare you! You profane my beauty! I'm going to exterminate you like I did the alderman! No! My makeup!
This is why you shouldn't let fanboys get involved in serious things like copyright cases, especially since in this day and age, everyone's an alleged expert. Like how Daniel Harris is an expert in history, despite getting all of his sources from blithering jackasses and his own fart-huffing contrarianism. The argument falls apart when you think about it even a little bit. 1. If Sony was trying to do this as a console war game changer, why would they do it after they turned their console interest into a secondary priority and effectively left PlayStation to die? 2. If Sony was involved with Pocket Pair from the start, where's the evidence? All you have is the Aniplex deal, which came a year and a half after launch, after it was already a successful IP in its own right. Palworld didn't even get a PlayStation port until later. It debuted on the Microsoft Xbox and on PC. 3. Where the hell is the China connection? DetroitOtaku cites that China has a large player base for the game, but the same can be said of Expedition 33, War Thunder, Digimon, and other games. China has the largest population as a nation. That's not an argument that you can use that this is a secret plot by the CCP. Pocket Pair is based out of Japan, not China. 4. If this isn't a case of copyright bullying of a successful brand, why did they not go after Craftopia as well, which had inspirations from Breath of the Wild? It's because the game got popular when it was inconvenient for Game Freak to lose face is why they're doing this. Not for any attempt to save Western and Japanese civilization from the Chinese barbarians. All in all, this article isn't the truth about the lawsuit. It's a bunch of insane ramblings of a madman who is so up his own fandom that he cannot see the blindingly obvious. The reason why DetroitOtaku cites these fanciful conspiracies about China and Sony is because that's all he has. These tinfoil hat conspiracies, none of which hold any basis in legal reality. The Trump-appointed copyright director already sent the patents that Game Freak are citing that Pocket Pair violated back to them, as did the Japanese patent office. If both of them are saying this might be copyright abuse, then it might be copyright abuse, and it's not some madcap conspiracy of Chinese and Jewish subversion in the market. Anyone who's been a fan of Pokemon, but isn't a blind brand loyalist like what remains supporting Pokemon today, can see that Game Freak are in a slump. Heck, even the non-fans can see it, with Digimon World Time Stranger objectively having more hype around it than the new Pokemon game, which has sold far fewer copies than the last Pokemon Legends game. This isn't a conspiracy by the Chinese and Western game journalists. It's the cold hard reality of it. Pokemon is losing steam as a brand, and it's doing so for the same reasons Star Wars did, and Marvel, and comic books in general, and so many major franchises that have gone woke and gone broke, as much of what happened to them is also going on here. Well, kinda. Probably. Rumors about the next generation being themed after DEI initiatives aside, Pokemon has been successful largely by accident, and as I discussed in previous videos, it's been making recent moves that do little more than piss the old guard of fans off. That's what this lawsuit is about. That's what the truth of the lawsuit is. Pocket Pair, who obviously named their company after a pair of pocket games that are companions and thus a pair, have created a game in the direction they would have liked to see Pokemon go in. Are the creatures similar? Yes. Are they distinct enough to be legally allowable? Again, yes. Do we have any proof that it's being done deliberately? Well, aside from an anonymous, quote, ex-employee who could have been a troll trying to make the company look bad, no. But it wouldn't matter if it was. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and despite what a certain Lincoln and Reagan hating commie neo-Confederate infiltrator will tell you, you don't need to cite your inspiration sources. In fact, you're under no obligation. Even if Pocket Pair did, very obviously in a way anyone but the willfully and blitheringly retarded can see. Star Wars is nothing but a transparent ripoff of Dune and Flash Gordon after all. But this isn't about being a ripoff. It is about a game using the very general mechanics of summoning an NPC that can be used in battle, which if Game Freak were to win this patent, which they very much aren't, would not just fuck over Pocket Pair. It'd open a floodgate of every creature collector, from Megami Tensei to Monster Hunter Stories to Digimon, all having to pay royalties to Game Freak. Which is funny I mentioned Megami Tensei, because Game Freak didn't even invent the mechanic to begin with. And that's a far more believable story than if this patent case goes in Palworld's favor, the market will be flooded with Sony and Chinese-funded Nintendo ripoffs. I mean, hardly a new game comes out now that isn't transparently ripping off of Breath of the Wild. Do you think this suit is going to stop that? No, of course not. But what do I know? I'm just a coupon on the internet. Which means we should leave this kind of stuff to guys with pasty skin and leather fetishes. Oh, and before I go, Sherman only did one thing wrong. He stopped. This has been the Koopa Man. If you like this video, leave a like and comment. Subscribe and check out my channel if you want to see more, as this is hardly my first Pokemon video. And until next time, game on.